My name is Dr Lorato Mokwena, and according to your program, I am responsible for doing the official welcome. We apologize for starting a bit late, but here we go. So the Rector of the University of the Western Cape, Professor Tyronne, Pretorius, Docentia, the Vice Chancellor and Principal of Sol Plaatje University, Professor M.O.R.E, the Head of the School of Humanities, this thing is very loud, Sol Plaatje University, Dr Trevor, the presenters of the colloquium, and to all other individuals in attendance today. In true Northern Cape spirit, good morning, dumelang, and goeiemorgen. The Noord-Kaap colloquium was born from a moment in which I was brave enough to question norms. The underrepresentation and invisibility of the Northern Cape had become a norm, and to a large extent, continues to be a norm in academia. Another norm that vexes my spirit is the exclusive, intimidating, and impersonal nature of typical academic gatherings. Conferences are jealously guarded as spaces where academics gather to marvel at each other's genius. That is, if you have an interesting enough topic to draw a crowd to your conference presentation in the first place. There are hardly spaces created where stakeholders can come together for mutual learning and teaching, earnest conversation, and maybe even plain old human interaction. So I founded the colloquium to challenge these two specific norms. Since its inception, the colloquium remains intentional about bringing change makers from all spheres together. This year, similar to last year, we are delighted to engage with academics, cultural activists, owners of non-profit organizations, and postgraduate students. One of the most central questions when planning the colloquium will always remain, how do we get the community involved in this colloquium? This year, the colloquium includes a screening of The Broken String, a documentary film that highlights the continued marginalization of the Bushman people in South Africa. And this event is open to everyone. As community is not only limited to non-university affiliated individuals, the colloquium also includes a plenary session with postgraduate students from the School of Humanities, and during this session, we will have frank conversation with students about research, academia, activism, and whichever other topic is deemed necessary. Additionally, when we think about the colloquium being a Northern Cape thing, whenever I have to type this in Noord-Kaap, then it takes quite a while, but I think my computer has gotten to the point where it just auto-selects the words for me. And when I think of what this colloquium would be called, I yearned for it to have a catchy name, a name that wasn't burdened with academic jargon, a name everybody could pronounce, and in a language that for all intents and purposes is a lingua franca of the Northern Cape. Since its inauguration last year, the colloquium has grown. I am proud to announce that we have a logo. The plant in the logo is the half-mens or half-human, and legend would have it that the Rechtersveld half-mens derives its name from the ancestors of the Bushmen who were driven south by warlike tribes from the north. Some turned back to look back across the Orange River and were turned into half-mens or half-people, and therefore they were forever gazing northwards. So, while it remains important that we look back and mourn the various injustices we endured, may we also very quickly look forward to create opportunities for growth and healing out of the fear of never reaching our full potential and only being half human. I am also proud to announce that the colloquium has extended its borders beyond South Africa. We are now a Southern African colloquium, and it's my sincere wish that we continue to grow. Colleagues, welcome to the 2022 installment of the Noord-Kaap.
Prof Andrew Crouch, Vice Chancellor and Principal of Sol Plaatje University. Dr. Kobus Rademeyer, head of the School of Humanities, and also his team from the school. The institutional advancement teams at Sol Plaatje University and at UWC, the participants and presenters at this year's colloquium, welcome to the second Noord-Kaap DIM conference. This is an essential conference for many reasons, starting with a partnership that we have established with Sol Plaatje University, our sister institution in the Northern Cape. It's also essential for us as a university because many of our alumni and current students are from the Northern Cape. Most importantly though, this conference focuses on a province that seems to remain on the margins of our society, unless it's time for election year. The Northern Cape is a rich and diverse province, and this conference should be established to investigate and collaborate around themes unique to this part of South Africa. This year's event focuses on the critical themes of Khoisan languages of Southern Africa, resistance against coloniality, contemporary challenges, community engagement, and legacies. As the Jamaican political activist Marcus Garvey wrote, I quote, "People without knowledge of the past, history, and cultures are like a tree without roots," end quote. These are important topics because it speaks to the tragic consequences of colonialism and apartheid that played themselves out in the Northern Cape. Because it was there that white domination, starting with the colonizers, slowly but determinedly vanquished South Africa's first people by subjugating not only them, but also their language and culture. Those wounds have never healed. Today the San people continue fighting for their language, which was not recognized as one of South Africa's official languages. As recently as last month, Khoisan San people marched to the Constitutional Court on International Day of the world's indigenous people to mark their protest against how they feel the South African government is treating them. Khoisan Chief Neville Felix told the newspaper, and I quote, "After 342 years of colonial oppression came a further 28 years of oppression under a democratic government. As noted by the South African Human Rights Commission report to the United Nations, the genocide against us continues. In 1989, 1992, we were excluded from the Convention for a Democratic South Africa, as well as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 1996, end quote. These words represent the anger and the disappointment of people who feel marginalized and forgotten in their own country. Therefore, it is fitting that this conference will focus on various aspects of the Khoisan people, their struggles and their survival, and how they use culture to differentiate their identity from an amorphous colored one. Then, of course, the rich mining history of the Northern Cape began in the 1860s and led to South Africa producing 95% of the world's diamonds and the rise of British immigrants like Cecil John Rhodes. I am sure that over the following days, your research will illuminate many unknown or forgotten aspects of the present and past Northern Cape. I wish you all a very productive conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mokwena, for that kind introduction. Normally when people introduce me and they read my CV, I say that that is something of the past. It's something that you just do at the time when you have to do it, and then people put it on a piece of paper and it becomes your curriculum vitae. But it helps, I think, in molding one, and it helps in terms of giving one a perspective of what the way forward should be. Let me start by thanking Professor Pretorius for that kind introduction to this symposium. And let me also thank colleagues here from University of the Western Cape. As you heard, it is my alma mater, for giving us the opportunity to partner with you in this Noord-Kaap colloquium. I'd also like to welcome the participants who are present here, both from University of the Western Cape, as well as Sol Plaatje University, and beyond the borders of Sol Plaatje University. We are pleased to once again partner with UWC to host this colloquium this year. I know that it cannot be held outside of the Northern Cape because that doesn't have to Noord-Kaap. It can't be a Western Cape, right? So this symposium or colloquium was well received last year, and I hope that we will exceed all expectations this year. Last year, if you recall, I spoke about the importance of this symposium or colloquium to the Northern Cape, to Sol Plaatje University, to the country, and for that matter, to the continent. I also spoke about the importance of the Northern Cape within the context of the South African economic and cultural mosaic. And let me just reminisce and remind the audience here what I spoke about, for those of you who are not here. Important points that I made at this first colloquium, which happened last year, September. I said that the Northern Cape, if you think of it as a province or place, it has always been seen as a transition point. A province where people pass through most of the time, but it's also a province which many people see as an area where you are being served and where you can extract. It's an extraction province. But it's also a province whose landscape is comprised of features and creatures that have histories, sometimes rubbed over or rubbed out or overwritten, but often the only trace that is left behind is a material one, normally a fossil or an inscription which reflect long past human activity and social life which happened in this region. These artifacts that are left for us by the past have taken many forms, and sometimes it transcends simple tokens, simple complications, simple significance, such as stones and bones. We know, and Professor Pretorius has referred to it, that violence was used and played a big role to raise certain identities and histories. And there are many examples littered across the Northern Cape about how violence was used to subjugate people, to try and erase not only their culture, but their history. Our most recent past, like many histories of other indigenous peoples, not only here, but in other parts of the world, Australia, North America, and others, have not been shining examples of human rights. And again, Professor Pretorius referred to what is happening currently around the fight for the languages of the San, and certainly their rights. We also know that Kimberley and the history of Kimberley and its impact on the Northern Cape and its landscape cannot be ignored. I mean, we have the open mine. It's who can miss the open mine, whether it's from the air or from your ground level. It's a sign that there were activities here, and again, the history of the open mine and mining here itself has its own violent history. We know that that's not the only physical remnant that was left, or the only physical evidence that was left of this past. And many scholars throughout the ages, the past 150 years, have written about this. I'm least qualified to actually talk about this, and I'm not going to even try and do that. Coming closer to languages, which is what you're going to explore during this colloquium, that's one of the topics you're going to explore. We know that Sol Plaatje, after whom this university has been named, was a camp fighter for a particular language. He used this Setswana in the medium of newspapers, in translation, in the books he has written. But there are many, many other authors who's tried to pen down the local languages of this region. They're not all that well known, and they don't have universities that are named after them. The question is, how do we remember them? How do we remember the other dominant language and languages that are spoken within this province? Some of this will be touched on through this colloquium. Now that is the past. That is what happened last year. This year, I would like us to look forward. And how do we look forward? I'd like to use the university as the vehicle, this university as the vehicle for our forward-looking perspective. This province now has a university. It didn't have a university when I was 18 years old. I had to go to Cape Town, to the University of the Western Cape. The question is, what do we do with this university? And how do we leverage this, the presence of this university, to preserve the rich history and culture of the North? I think this colloquium is a step towards trying to do that. I want to talk to you about this university as an engaged social participant giving expression to democratic practice, seized with the challenges facing society, and enabling participation in social, cultural, and economic life. How will this colloquium allow us to bring together stakeholders from various spheres whose work focuses on the Northern Cape? I mean, we are not the only ones in this room who has to have an interest in the histories and the culture of the Northern Cape. There are people beyond this room that have a similar view. Now, since its inception as a university, Sol Plaatje University was expected, and there was an expectation raised, that we would emerge in a tradition of a critical and critically engaged humanist university. And I've said it on numerous occasions. I actually have one slide which I commonly project where I say we would like to humanize education. And how do we humanize education? Is not to forget where we come from, but to make sure that we take our current context into account. Now, a tradition of humanizing education at a university would need for us to reimagine and reinvent what we are doing. And again, when I speak at other forums, I talk about the innovative university and how we need to unbundle the traditional way of doing things and almost reassemble the education. But I don't want to be controversial today because some of my colleagues in the higher education sector that is a very controversial approach. So this university is operating in a context. And what is our context as Sol Plaatje University? What is our local context? What is the context of the Northern Cape? I would say the Northern Cape has much to offer. It's got a lot to offer. Although it only produces 2% of the gross national product of the country. It has a small population, but it's our wider province. We know, and I'll just mention a few, we know we have industries here, agriculture, renewable energy, ecotourism, irrigation schemes. We have a very, very active agricultural industry along the banks of the Orange River. I was actually surprised to hear, having worked in the Western Cape or spent 30 odd years in the Western Cape, I was surprised to hear that the industries, wine industry along the banks of the Orange River produces more wine annually than the whole of the Western Cape. Did you know that? Maybe that's the reason why people in Northern Cape drink more wine. I don't know. It's possible. We know we have provincial parks, 5 in fact. We know of our spring flowers when the desert turns into a floral kingdom. We know about the diversity of our peoples. We know that we have opportunities in terms of the square kilometer array. The manganese mines, where a major part of the world's deposits are found here. Iron ore in the Bosmasburg, Katu areas, which has changed the lives of so many communities, sometimes not in a very positive way. Sometimes the very presence of those mines have had a negative influence. We see this also in Aggeneys, in the Gamsberg. We've seen what diamond mining has done to Kimberley. I've said in my inaugural address that the university, through its presence here, given the fact that mining is in its twilight years, diamond mining, it's in its twilight years in Kimberley, that in 10 to 20 years from now, I would like to see Kimberley being a university town, very much like the Stellenbosch and the Potchefstroom's and Rhodes. So there are many, many opportunities. Apart from the beauty of the Northern Cape, its open skies, the resilience of its people, the friendliness of its people, the diversity of its people. There are many things that we have in the Northern Cape. But all those things, all those opportunities are not always accessible to our peoples. Why? Why is it that in the Northern Cape we have all these wonderful opportunities, we have all the beauty, we have all the natural resources here? Why is it that the people of the Northern Cape are dogged by poverty and inequality? Why? I know the reason because I travel quite widely across the Northern Cape and I see with my own eyes the poverty and inequality. In fact, the HSRC report, which we commissioned about a year and a half or 2 years ago, just for the Francis Bar district, indicated that the reason why our peoples cannot access these opportunities is because of a lack of education. I'll give you the hard facts. This HSRC report found that only 28% of the young people between the age group 18 to 25 in the Northern Cape have a matric. That's less than 1/3. And of that group, only 3% have a post-matric qualification. Now, how are those people, or how are the peoples in the Northern Cape going to have access and plug into the economic opportunities that the Northern Cape present if that is the level of education that we're experiencing? And that is what I have identified as our Achilles heel in the Northern Cape. On the one hand, opportunities. On the other hand, lack of education. And that gives this wide divide or this schism where the opportunities is at your doorstep, but you cannot plug into those opportunities. And inevitably, the companies and the businesses that operate in the Northern Cape bring people from outside of the Northern Cape. And then what happens? The squalor, the poverty continues. So how do we address this? Sol Plaatje University, being 9 years old now, has committed to start chipping away at this challenge. We cannot do everything, but I believe that we have to start somewhere. I'll quote from the first strategic plan of Sol Plaatje University. It says, "The drive for equity, social justice and democracy is a particularly significant policy focus in the South African higher education context, given the high levels of poverty and inequality that remain endemic in this society." In the second strategic cycle, which we are currently working under, we're still sitting with the same problems. So it's important for Sol Plaatje University as an emerging university to respond positively to these key challenges that we have as a society in the Northern Cape. How are we trying to do this? Are we starting to make an impact in the Northern Cape as a university? I would say yes, we're starting. It's small, but it's growing. We are committed to a scholarship of engagement that has already resulted in active participation in several stakeholders' engagements, bilateral agreements, and SPU as a knowledge partner. And the partnership with the University of the Western Cape is one such partnership where we have endeavored to put our intellectual strengths, put our knowledge to the test to see if we can identify these challenges and be more focused about how we're going to try and resolve this. I'm a pragmatist. You can ask my colleagues. I say we can talk and talk and talk and talk until kingdom comes. But the problem is not going to be solved by talking. The problem and the challenges we are facing as the Northern Cape and as a country is going to be solved by doing. We must pick up our socks and we must start doing ourselves. This is what we're trying to do at Sol Plaatje University, certainly in the time that I have been the Vice Chancellor. This approach is aimed at facilitating the integration of the university into social, relevant, economic, and cultural environments and communities in order to engage, contribute, and benefit from knowledge engagements as a fully fledged participant with local and regional networks. And Mr. Sompondo, our Director of Institutional Advancement, will tell you that I do not believe in unequal partnerships. If the partnership is not mutually beneficial, then I believe it's an unequal partnership, and one should not enter into unequal partnerships, because inevitably one is going to repeat the mistakes of the past. Our history in the Northern Cape is littered with examples of unequal partnerships. I have hence signed a town and gown agreement with our city. As a university, we are involved in the Northern Cape Innovation Forum to try and stimulate innovation in the Northern Cape. You've heard the initiative around the talent pipeline program, which is aimed at trying to upskill the youth, build that social gap to enable youth to become university ready, because if we increase the pool of young people that can access university, I believe we are chipping away at these challenges. We have recently launched a Center for Continuous Professional Development, and the idea of that center is to offer informal as well as formal short course programs to enable people of the Northern Cape and beyond to access education in a less formal setting. There's been tremendous interest in that center, and we are already going to offer our first short course. I believe it's in project management, if I'm not mistaken, in November. So things are moving. We have many other partnerships with the province, with other universities in the central region, and also a footprint in the Uppington area through our Center for Entrepreneurship and Rapid Innovation Incubation. So we're also in talks with the municipalities of Carnarvon to, together with the DSI and the SKA, establish a rural knowledge hub in Carnarvon. So these are some of the initiatives that we started here. As I said, for me, action speaks louder than words. So our academics, and I'm encouraging them to be proactive. Our academics and our academic programs speak to local needs. We know we have a shortage of teachers, so education is one of our biggest programs. We know that data sciences and digital literacies you cannot do without it these days, so we have a program in data sciences, heritage studies, and this I presume Dr. Lorato would be part of the Heritage Studies Initiative, public management, and soon we will also introduce agriculture programs. I mention these things because I believe that the university in the community, in the context of our sea of poverty and inequality, has to be proactive in speaking to the needs out there. We can certainly do more. Yes, you can never do enough. We have to revert 350 years of suppression, of being held back. So this is just a start. But as the university grows, so will its footprint grow across the Northern Cape landscape. Who would have thought that 60 years ago, when the University of the Western Cape was formed as Bush College, that its reach will be way, way beyond the borders of the Western Cape. There are many, many alumni that came from Kimberley, Uppington. Prof Pretorius himself is from Uppington. He's also from the Northern Cape. So we know that through education, you can make a difference. But education must be targeted, we must be proactive, and we must be contextual with our education. And that is what we, as Sol Plaatje University, would like to do, that we are doing, and will continue to do so. So the unique contribution of our SPU academics participating in this colloquium is evidence that it is happening. And I'm not going to mention them, they're on the program, but I want to thank them as well as those that are speaking on the program for your contribution. It's a small step, but it's a step in the right direction. Once again, welcome to this colloquium. Welcome to Sol Plaatje University, the smallest university in South Africa. But being small doesn't mean you shouldn't punch, and punch way above. And I always say, your mass, not your weight. Thank you very much. Enjoy your discussions over the next 2 days and beyond. Hopefully, you're going to have solutions for us and not be part of the problem. I say that with a lot of trepidation, because all of us can complain as much as we want. We are not going to change the world through complaining. We are going to change the world by being proactive, by doing small things and doing it right, and doing it right every day. And that is how you change, and that is how you improve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, moderator. Now, when such things are said, you feel some grandeur en français. That's normally when you walk in the street, no one sees such things. You are just an ordinary mortal walking a street. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Universities of the Northern Cape, Sol Plaatje University. Like the Vice Chancellor, I would not know why it just didn't, it wasn't just the University of Northern Cape, of the Northern Cape, which would have located it geographically, pertinently there. But as someone from Botswana, with a long history of Kimberley, of our grandfathers coming this way, that's where they also got the idea that there was an ox wagon and ox plow. So this region has been a technological and civilizational impact on Southern Africa. So I hope as this university grows, it will revert to that historical influence where things in Southern Africa started. And education also. I mean, if you speak of Setswana, it's just near here in Kurman, where the first Bible in 1884 was published by the London Missionary Society. And it became the first literary text that went as far as the Zambezi, the Victoria Falls, where the Ngwatu were. So, small province in South Africa, but historically big. So, as you heard from Professor Pretorius, how he nicely contextualize this conference, the people who historically were here, and when also Professor Crouch took over in the opening, did sort of expand on some of the important things that are happening around here with the people and also with the province. So when I was invited to come, I have to navigate between my laptop and this one, but it doesn't matter, it will be okay. 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 Oh, just being silly. Okay, so we are here. This This is a map by a Botswana organization which maps the Khoisan in southern Africa. You see Namibia taking quite a good chunk, represented by that color, the bluish color, by the Nama. You've got the Nama and then the Damara to the north, into Namibia, into Angola, sorry, from Namibia into Angola. And then into Angola, you have also a lot of little populations of the Kung. In 2014, were called they because with the Angolan War, there was such a fright, a scare, that the Angolan Civil War could have wiped out some northern Kung populations in Angola. And so we're called in there to come and identify them because they'd run into the DRC. So they were found there, about 600 people in the DRC, but speaking some Portuguese and then having some Portuguese names. And they could figure out that they were from Angola. So,
may I disturb you?
Yeah.
I just want to change the mic for you so you're more comfortable.
Yeah. Oh, lovely.
Now you'll be able to
Yeah.
type proper.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Oh, yeah.
It does work.
Yeah, it's okay. So, the Khoisan, if you look quite closely, therefore, are a Southern African people. All countries of Southern Africa, Angola, Namibia, Botswana, South Africa, even Swaziland was involved, and down there, the Kregui, which then went extinct, and there, near us there, you will see, I can point, that the Komani, the Ngu people just shaded there, also went extinct. Botswana, when you count the little names that you see there, has quite some variety of these people. And when I present later on, I'll be just giving as case studies some of the situations that are occurring there. So Namibia also has quite a good number if you count the language groups there. And Angola is now mainly the Kung, the Kwadi. You've got texts that the Portuguese reproduce. No one had an idea of how these languages were written, but they did produce something that linguists are now following upon. There was a language spoken by the Kwadi people. It had some interesting affinities with the Kwekwe-Goap, the main language of Namibia, and it's also extinct. So, when you listen to this history, language extinction, it gives you a very, very troubling sort of vision of things that are happening around the Khoisan people. So when I was looking at how I could really address this conference, I thought I should make an assessment of these languages in Southern Africa. I'm reversing, okay. Okay, so let me just leave that and then go to this one. That when you hear of people ordinarily writing or talking about Khoisan, this is the sort of things they are talking about. And somewhere making a distinction of people that were called Bushmen. Immediately you hear of such terms coming up. There are civilizational bias that a certain high society, high civilization, is in contact with people that it will only describe as Bushmen. But we know from history that the Bushmen, there is nothing that is Bushmen about the Bushmen, and there is nothing in history that was Bush about these people. They inhabited a land, Southern Africa, wide as it is, as a country without borders, a free country for them, and within that, exercise a culture of their own, not a Bushman culture. So if you start to describe people as Bushmen, it's a civilizational bias because you compare the uncomparable. So it's very important in anthropology and in other studies that you place yourself on a right perspective if you want to deal with people. So I want to discard this term because it describes no one. And in terms of civilization, everyone is civilizationally accomplished in his own terms, in his own social context. So it should be clear, therefore, that when we talk of such kind of people, we are talking from a bias of civilization, a bias of culture, and also a bias of history. You will also notice from this kind of descriptions of the common knowledge that you are talking about people, and these people are not talking about themselves. So that's where this other bias is. Spoken about, but not speaking about themselves. So this bias is perpetuated up to today. We cannot just disentangle, come out of this bias. Later on, if I reach that, because I have so many slides, I may get so tired that I'll fall down before I say important things. When now you look at this thing, I don't want to dwell so much in the introduction. Just suffice to say that we now have this term Khoisan. We know it started by the most important people who spoke about the Khoisan is Kola, and then you have also earlier you had a Shapera, an anthropologist, a South African anthropologist also with origin from Britain, who did quite some outstanding studies to understand what we are talking about when we say Khoisan. And he found that there are two groups in Southern Africa. And then later on, Kola found that you should be saying there are about three. So according to Shapira, the two groups, the Khoi, those that speak Khoi languages related to the Khoi Kwadi I've said earlier on, who were in southern Angola, northern Namibia. So they have a language that has its own peculiarity. And these are the same people who were as far as Cape Town and were called the Khoi, or the corruption Khoi, and the corruption and civilizational bias, the Hottentots, because you could buy cattle with a bottle of some hot stuff. So if you oppress people to that level, you can exploit them and do such things. So they were called Hottentots, and the people who were called Hottentots are the Khoi, and the Khoi meaning the real people. So if you were to be right, you would have been talking of the real people of the Cape. And when you talk of the Namaqualand, the Nama people, the Kwa every time is used is Namaqualand, and they were still the same people up to the Orange River into southern Namibia, so they were quite widespread. And next to them, there were also some what the Khoi called the Saon. You'll excuse me for not pronouncing that word. Gatherers. They were hunting and gathering only because the Khoi were herders, cattle herders, and most of the time they will also hunt and gather. It's not known so much if they had any agriculture with crops, but they were cattle herders, the Khoi, and then there were their neighbors who were essentially gatherers. So the term Bushman was then coined around this hunting gathering mode, that the people who rely uniquely on field resources, on bush resources. It was not a language or a people's sort of a name. It was sort of a description of habits of the bush, of the open country as they were. Now, over history, therefore, you have this confusion, and it is now Shapira who tries to make sense out of this. Sense out of this because you will find, especially in Botswana, people in the hunter-gathering mode, but speaking a language which belongs to the Khoi group, the Khoi-Kwadi group. So you say, but how did they just become hunters when the Khoi-Kwadi were cattle herders? So this is a mystery of history. We don't know how. We don't even know how also people who are just as dark as myself, the Damara, got to speak a Khoi-Kwadi language. So Southern Africa has all these mysteries in its history, prehistory, that we need to really clarify. Some years ago at Leipzig, at the Center for Human History, Ethnology, and all, we did examine how long these people have been here and what happened over the 10,000 years. And we concluded that there were so many things that happened over 10,000 years. First, that there were movements of people who came into Southern Africa, found those that are hunter-gathering, and these people were bringing the cow. So from 10,000, there were some movements, first with sheep and then cattle coming into Southern Africa. And when you look now at these people, who could have been the cattle herder. You look at the biology, some Japanese have long really studied the biology, the genome of some of the people of Southern Africa, and found that those that have lactoprotein tolerance are the Nama and the Herero. And a small population, or half of the population of Tswana speakers, they have that kind of mutation in the gene, which would suggest that as long time as before even Christ, they were already interacting regionally with cattle. But the Tswana, you recall, are Bantu, so they are recent. They are like 2,000 years in Southern Africa. So it means they might have taken some genes from the Khoi people. So when you are Tswana speaking and you have a certain civilizational attitude, know that you might be sharing the same genome with some of the people. So when there is culture difference, people think they are better. But when there is a genome history, people should know that they are together, they belong together, and the culture manifestation might be just a simple and superficial difference. So the objectives of the study is just really to make an assessment and really put ourselves in the right perspective of who we are talking about when we say the indigenous people of the Northern Cape, and then elaborating on that, the indigenous people of Southern Africa. We are talking, as Kola said, of ancient people, ancient populations who were here for a long time. Earlier on, I said they are now regarded to be belonging into three language family, the Khoisan, the Southern San, and you have some peripheral group, the Kwang Sasi, the Ngaria. We are still trying to find out whether they belong to the San, because the San are the Southern, and then the Northern, who are the Kung. So maybe 2 families and a half of languages in Southern Africa before the arrival of the Bantu languages. So I've already said a bit about that one. And in the classification, so this map replicates the map that I said earlier on. The language families as obtains is just similar to that. And I've already spoken about. So those who are really of the Khoi, the central Khoi, the Nama, Nama Damara, and then the Kora, and then you have all those Botswana groups coming in there, and then you have the Northern San, and then the Southern San, the Northern, there will be somewhere, Northern Namibia, and then Southern Angola. So if you put in the East African Khoi, the Sandawi, Khoisan, the Sandawi, and then the Hadza, you will find that Southern Africa, some few thousand years ago, was really populated by clique languages. And when you look at some of the scripts from historians, Arabs have been reliable in keeping some history, dating even before 2,000 years. They have in their scripts people they call the Wakak, so clique people. And they were from Ethiopia, southern Sudan, down to this side. So we are talking really of a geographically spread people who once inhabited southern Africa without any border. Yes. So in this classification, though, it's clear that we have this diversity within Khoisan, and that we need to be very careful that we don't just put together linguistically people who culturally may be different, and therefore we need to see how we are going to account for their cultural and linguistic studies. Keep on confusing, pressing the wrong thing. Yes, so the current condition really replicates the prehistorical, the pre-colonial, colonial, and pre-colonial situation. When the Bantu population moved southward into Southern Africa, from Central Africa, from even some parts of West Africa, because they are Benue Congo populations, they found Khoisan people in Southern Africa. They also found people with a different culture. So when you look at the word in Setswana, Basa-Rwa, or the Ba-Rwa, the Rwa, this Rwa is from Toa. Setswana has converted all the T's into the R. Kari is just similar to Kati, T. So the Toa, it meant a pygmy, a Congo pygmy. So Ba-Rwa, because they were to their south, the Toa people, so you see that the contact attitude towards the Khoisan is quite civilizationally biased. You are in contact with inferior people. And this is exactly what happened with the Dutch, the Portuguese, when they came into Southern Africa. When they meet these people, they have an attitude towards which does not facilitate a mutual understanding. And that's how you are going to have Hottentots and the Bushmen and all the sort of labels that you have. So Botswana also, and all the Bantu people in Southern Africa, they had their own attitude. So the Khoisan, or the San, as we may say today, have a very, very painful experience in contact situation, that they were not facilitated to interact with people who would consider them as equals, but people who consider them as inferior. And this is really something that has happened and had consequences in assimilation and domestication. Even the British, they used this term to domesticate, just domesticated them. There is a text in 1947 in Botswana. There was an incident with some pilots. They were from Lusaka flying to Johannesburg. They had a plane crash by Botswana Makadi salt pans. They disappeared. No one saw them. No one knows what happened. But there was a suspicion that the San group around that area ate them. So the High Commissioner writes, please, the local chief there, go and domesticate So this has been the attitude from the British, from the Botswana, from the Nguni, whoever came into contact with these people. So there was domestication. And this attitude is continuing even up to today. If the languages of Northern Cape have disappeared, are disappearing, is because the one who thinks has a superior culture wants to domesticate, make them like they, change them to what they are. So whites did that, blacks did that. So you cannot just, in the modern setup of South Africa, and you are the ruler, a black man, running South Africa, have any pride because your ancestors did exactly what is happening, assimilated, domesticated some of the Khoisan people. So this is really the historical as well as the current situation. So if you pursue that one, you will see that Southern Africa really is a country that has not known how to manage indigenous populations and facilitating for them to really enjoy citizenship within the countries in which they are found. You have 11 languages in South Africa, but none of them is a language of the people that you call the San. And when earlier on, the Vice Chancellor from the University of Western Cape mentioned this, I said, and then also our Vice Chancellor Crouch here, is that why didn't they come to the negotiation in 1993-94? Because they did not have educated people. Why they did not have educated people? Because they did not have any language which was literate. None of them. And why so? Because instead of a sign language, you say, okay, learn in another African language, Afrikaans, Setswana. So if ever they could be educated, it was in another person's language. And therefore, if they come to the table, what are they going to talk about? They're going to talk for these languages that educated them. So, assimilation and domestication, in my theory, is that it's just going now to dehumanize you and give you a false identity. So, the message here is for Northern Cape people to find their roots and their identity. Language is important. Indigenous linguists in these languages must be raised so that they speak for themselves. Namibia is doing better. We've got linguists in Kwekwe go up. But South Africa must do better. Raise indigenous linguists in Khoisan, in San languages, and they will then speak for a language which is their identity and their culture. Okay, so when it's not moving, I must continue to move. The current situation, therefore, it doesn't matter whether it was the colonial or the post-colonial policies. Look at the policies of countries like Botswana. Botswana has nothing, nowhere in its official text, constitution or laws, where it's got a facilitation for Khoisan. Nothing. Come to South Africa, this wonderfully articulated democracy, which allows, in an African context, freedoms to the very elemental units, has no facilitation for Khoisan people. So, what should happen and what can be done? What should happen is that the Khoisan people themselves, speaking for themselves, not spoken for by anyone, must ensure that state policies talk about them, talk for them, and state policies plan development of their languages through literacy and through revitalization. Languages can be revived. We need to know that. And therefore, it means people themselves in this region, Northern Cape, into Namibia, into Botswana, must be united or facilitated to be united to speak for themselves, to speak for their languages, their development. Most of the speech these days will be about land. Yes, it's very good to own land because it's within that land that you really experience your identity and your value as a human being. But one other step is to speak for your language. Own it, use it, and ensure that it develops resources. A week ago, we were excited to see that the Ngu, though it is already a dead language, had developed dictionary resources that can be used by researchers and by people themselves, the grandchildren of the people that spoke the language. So this is one project that needs to happen for all other Khoisan languages in Southern Africa, that they should have modern resources that will speak for them. Now, when we examine this situation, the current situation, I hope it will just advance. No, it's frozen. We see this problem that most governments are not aware of, that independence of African states did not mean facilitation of Khoisan people in their region. Namibia will do its own, though Namibia must confess is doing much better than any other country in Southern Africa. Is that independence was a story of other people, not the Khoisan. In Botswana, it's the same story. South Africa is the same story. Zimbabwe's got a little population, but it's the same story. Tanzania is the same story. So, if we realize that as Africans, we have, even in the post-colony, had policies that still oppress other people, you must describe those policies as policies of post-coloniality. That's the problem we're having. Khoisan people in Southern Africa are still in a post-colonial situation. They are colonized. No one regards them as equal. And therefore, in this pitiful situation, you may not expect to see them revitalizing, promoting their languages, their lifestyle to anything that government will consider as viably contributing to development. But who should say that? The people themselves. The people themselves must tell government that they are still under the yoke of colonialism, that their independence is yet to come. And this independence is when they are valued as people with their own culture, with their own language, and with their own territoriality, which is not bordered by political borders, but a wider country where they can interact and exchange experiences which will help them engage development in their own terms. So this is really a message that I need to emphasize, that, it's a pity when we look at African development policy, especially in Southern Africa, that there is nothing that is still liberating or facilitating for the Khoisan to really engage meaningfully and ably in any development, politically and otherwise. So this is really the problem we are having. Now, I should be moving towards conclusion, moderator. Yes, I should be moving towards conclusion. Is that I'm happy that this second conference of the Northern Cape thing should be taking a message from the Northern Cape people that we need now to move towards a situation where we take Khoisan people seriously and then facilitate for them to engage development meaningfully. But my message, as I put a point to it, is that please, my fellow people, raise linguists among themselves. It's not enough to be talking about anything else, everything else, without language capacitation. Please. People were able to bring dead languages from the graves because they raised linguists. So this is a challenge, not just to you, but to us linguists. I'm doing a lot of documentation in Botswana, which for many languages is now a loss, but a documentation that will give you methods of how to go back and do the right sort of things. The right sort of things is to know your language and to document it so that it speaks your culture. No language can speak any other person's culture. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof Chebanne, and welcome to Kimberley again. My question is, and thank you for a very detailed presentation about the histories, the complexities around nomenclature, and the kind of marginalizations that have gone through some of the indigenous groups, so to speak. I'm a half anthropologist. I always say this with trepidation because there's a real anthropologist in our team. I'm more into museums and heritage and stuff like that. And we know what museums as institutions have done to the Khoi and San groups in terms of some of the institutions that have actively contributed to the marginalization and almost mischaracterization of the rich cultures. My question comes from that, and I'm not a linguist, is today, as we deal with these groups, the first thing I want to hear from you is the question of nomenclature. because I see you use interchangeably quite a lot of names referring to these groups. The Khoisan, the Khoisan, the Kwe, and there's quite a number of the Bushmen, I always want to know, and I know if I had the power, I would ask the community themselves what they want to be called. Because as academics, we always project these names to the people, and sometimes they don't identify themselves that way. So up to today, I'm still wondering what is the correct nomenclature. That's one. The second comment for me is, how do we move away from this anthropologizing, this continued anthropologization of the indigenous communities, which is, it seems there's almost this age to study them, to further understand them, to dissect their cultures, to classify, categorize. We almost feels to me, even from the position of the academy, we are reproducing these taxonomies of othering, these groups, to the extent that I was talking to my friend here. Sometimes I feel like we should just let people be, because we continue to want to study them. They continue to be subjects, and for me that's quite disenfranchising to an extent. I'm happy for this conference because I think it then pitches a different trajectory that says let's move away from this pitch of studying these people, or I even say these people, which is again very difficult nomenclature. To kind of working with these communities, to develop language, like you rightly say, is about development. What are we doing as universities to develop these languages? You made references to dictionaries. I know there's some project on digitization. There's some projects on short courses. I know UCT has started something along those lines. So beyond these conferences, and these papers that we produce, what can we do as the academy? And I think that's the question that ourselves at SPU, when we started this university, was always at the back of our minds. What is it that we can do? We have not gotten the answer. We're still continuing to reflect on it, but we're moving towards some center for languages and culture, which we hope will start these little things for me, and not projects, he doesn't like the word project, but these ways of trying to work with the communities for their own good rather than for us studying. Thank you, that was a comment.
Thank you. It's as difficult as the history of these people. And then you will see all these words that have been retained to call the indigenous first people of Southern Africa are names from others. They are not their own sort of words. There is no one who ordinarily would say Amsan, or just, you say Kwekwe go up, Kwekwe, yeah, you say that, Khoisan. So, how can you change this? When you allow people themselves, not within a confine of a country, to have a broader interaction with others, so that a South African person knows the experience of Botswana, Namibian, Angolan person, you will see emerging proper names when themselves can describe their own experiences, cultural, linguistic, and so on. So it's because for a long time, as academics, we settle for those kind of easy nomenclatures, and it's a pity that it is that. The other one, anthropologizing. I like that that neologism. It's quite important. Is in the nature of an academic discourse that we are trained within certain disciplinary models that sort of influence our theoretical perspectives. I think as Africans, we need to innovate within this anthropology, the way we look at ourselves and how we can define and describe others of ourselves. So it's also our fault, because you see the Western education, it has a bearing on our way of thinking. I'm always, give an example of the Afrikaans. 1910, there was no Afrikaans in school. It was Dutch. 1900, it was Dutch. But immediately they decided in 1910, coming up to the 1930s, 40s, they completely changed, in their academic perspective. So it's one experience in Africa that you say, let other people in Africa emulate the way the African-speaking people transformed, even the way to redefine education. It wasn't on terms of European language knowledge, but in terms of their own language knowledge. So by 1970, when they were doing open heart transplant in Africans' notes in their medical thing, it was a phenomenal development with a language. But that by 1900, there was nothing like an official language. It was not even considered. Why can't African academics emulate such kind of development and really do come out of the model of European academic theories and come to authentic theories? So that's one thing. And I'm happy you say you ask questions, but you can also be a solution to those questions. So thank you so much.
Before I introduce myself, there are a number of things that that I picked up that I want to touch on regarding the welcoming remarks from the Vice Chancellors this morning, whereby being proactive was one thing that was mentioned, and I'm extremely impressed by that. And then the good thing is the support from the Vice Chancellors from both universities. That normally doesn't happen for our languages, Khoisan languages, and so on. So I'm looking forward, to the kind of collaboration. So let me start off by introducing myself. I am Prof Niklaas Fredricks. Just recently became a prof, so I'm still getting used to the idea. So it was just in July. So, and I'm from the Namibia University of Science and Technology, and currently the acting HOD of the Department of Communication and Languages. And I actually obtained my master's and PhD at the University of the Western Cape. To the point that when I actually, when I look at all the documentation around and I saw UWC, I was like, oh my God, I'm at home. So that's partly the reason why it seems I didn't even send the bio, because I'm at home. And here am I. And the other thing, thinking about the Northern Cape, where I am today, I must thank the organizers and especially Dr. Mokwena for inviting me, because I always felt that, I must get an opportunity to address members in the Northern Cape about the situation of the Nama and Kwekukova, because things are happening. You just see in the newspapers and also, in the media that things are happening and so on. So, but, as a product of UWC, I think I need to mention the issue of grooming your own. Prof Chebanne actually mentioned it, and I'm a product of that. I was trained by CASAS that Prof Chebanne is also part of. So what they have done, I think it was one of those things whereby it's an opportune time for all of us, because the linguists who were developing Khoisan, who were actually doing it, they retired last year, the last one. There were two at the University of Namibia. So I just took over just on time, So this kind of interventions, it can definitely be done, whereby I don't, as a speaker of Nama, don't talk about the Northern Cape Nama. Let me assist and groom someone from the Northern Cape and let them be the leaders of their languages and their dialects. So to avoid this situation whereby someone from outside knows more than you and wants to tell you more about your language. So we don't want that. We need to come in and assist. And for me, I was fortunate to be assisted by the likes of Prof Chebanne and then the entire Casas family, whereby African languages are being developed. So today, I want us to look at the talk is titled Proposal for a Harmonized Orthography to Empower Nama Spoken in South Africa. So currently, Prof Chebanne made reference to the situation of Namibia, which is extremely advanced, and it is one of the Khoisan languages where I always say I hate to hear the word endangered, because I was also trained like that. When you read the literature, you are like, Khoisan is also endangered. And only to, you continue, and when you go out there, you are like, no way. Not especially in Namibia. It is sound, it is safe. So why do people say that it is endangered? So it's from this premise that I am addressing you today. So my sincere apology for the mic. We are not, good with this. You talk, you don't know if the people are hearing you, all these things, but okay, I will continue. All right, so let me start with the introduction. One thing we need to understand is that languages are spoken across borders and are grouped in zones. So where we are currently, Northern Cape and southern parts of Namibia, especially the Karas region, they are just neighbors, brothers. We are next to each other. But then what I've realized is that we have got a situation where Khoisan is well established just on the other side of the border, and this side we are struggling. So something needs to be done. So this is, the premise. So this calls for a cross-border orthographies that would aid development. And the good thing is, under the CASAS network, in 2007, we have done a harmonized orthography for Khoi and San languages. And so we have got the material already. My fear is to find a situation whereby the Nama is developed in the Northern Cape here, and it is different from the others. That would actually impact development. So we don't want that. We want a situation whereby it's harmonized. And the good thing is, Namibia, alongside Botswana and even southern Angola, have been working together at the orthography levels. So Nama is a Khoi language variety spoken in more than 3 countries, especially, we have got South Africa, Namibia, and then Botswana, and then in some parts of Angola also. Lately we have learned. So the language is called Khoisan for pragmatic reasons in Namibia to include the Nama, Damara, and the Haingom speakers. So just to give a little situation or context around this issue. There was a question also from the floor. What do the people themselves, call themselves? And so on. So in my studies, for example, I've realized that no one actually calls themselves Khoisan. No one, not a single one. That's what I've realized, especially for my PhD, whereby in the Nama areas, which is the southern parts, central and southern parts, from Windhoek up to the border with Northern Cape, they call themselves Nama. And they are like, oh, no, I'm a Nama. I'm not a Khoisan. Where does this come from? And, in some instances, they are blaming us, the linguists. To say, no, you are the ones calling us names. So, I was just laughing about it when the question actually came from the floor, who are we? And then the Damaras the same, so, and then the other thing with languages, they are quite sensitive, the Nama and the Damara, to the point that Namas don't want to be associated with the Damara, Damaras don't want to be associated with the Nama, and so on. So, but for me, I had a little taste for them, when I was conducting, research, the field data. I would ask them, okay, so I'm a Nama. Yes, you are Nama. Saduki Namado. Yeah, Saduki Namado. You are Nama. Okay, it's fine. And then I would ask them, tell me about this boy here. I mean, the Damara boy now. So this is a Damara place now, a town. And then I would ask them, and this boy, tell me more about the boy. Did he have any contact with the Namas? No. He doesn't know Namas. Okay, fine. No, I'm not fighting. It's okay. And then I would just start a conversation with the Damara boy now. A conversation, and we would discuss, we would talk, and then for 2-3 minutes, and then I would ask them, are you still convinced that Nama and Damara, are not together? We understand each other, but still, Damaras, we don't like Namas. So that's the situation. So this is where you would find, the Hingom is also, the Hingom is part of the Damara as well. But for them also, they don't want to be associated with the Damara. They are fine with, being called Hingom and so on. So these situations are complex. And as we move forward, I don't expect the Nama spoken in South Africa just to be, one dialect. We could actually find a number of dialects, but how do we deal with them? That's the biggest question that we need to think of. So later on, I will give you dialect areas of Namibia, where Khoisan is spoken, and then we'll come down to the situation in South Africa. So in South Africa, currently it is simply called Nama. I heard Nama and then Namaqua in some instances, but Nama is what I hear in South Africa. I hope I got it right. But this is from the literature, of course. So as academics, we are guided by that. Sometimes we don't agree, but what can you say if you didn't prove it? So until such time, I would use that. So Khoisan is a well-established language, So I think Nama spoken in South Africa should capitalize on this. It's of no use for us to start all over when the process has been started. So as you can see there, the first official orthography of Khoisan was published in 1970, but of course it was in Afrikaans. And then the second one in 1977, and then the third version, that is the one that we are using currently of 2003. So this is the particular orthography that I've also challenged over the years. Because instead of giving us a writing system, they wanted to prescribe. In some instances, they would say, no, this word should be used and not the other. This should be used and so on. And this especially happened with the Bondel-Swarts Nama, which is spoken in the southern parts. Close to Karasburg here, close to the Northern Cape. So for these people, they always replace the vowel O with A. And then the orthography actually states there are a list of words. Instead of O, you must say, instead of A, you must say O. So for us, when you say ton, from the central Nama, ton. But for them, they say tren. Or for an owl, they say trenis. We say honos. But then the orthography said it must be honos, moving forward. So which becomes a problem, especially if you look at the situation of the Nama close to the South African border, whereby because of the political history, where people have had to shift from their language to Afrikaans, for example. If you are doing this, you are looking for trouble. People will run away. We won't have speakers because if they can't even use their version, what's in for them? So those are some of the challenges that we have currently. All right. So what is the challenge? So we are faced with a challenge. According to Austin 2021. Although endangered, the Khoisan branch of languages Nama and Damara are standardized together as Namibian Khoisan are well documented. All right. So that has been the issue, the narrative in the literature, whereby the word endangered, and I really hate it. I must say, because I am of the opinion, or I'm convinced, with my research that Khoisan in Namibia is safe. I always say Khoisan currently, it can be found on the popular networks like, online. Facebook, you find people actually chatting in Khoisan. And then not only that, I say, if a language has penetrated the hip-hop culture, the hip-hop, then you must know you are there. Competing for space with other stronger languages, dominant languages like English, Afrikaans, and so forth. So the situation in Namibia is a little bit better, but we can capitalize. We as Northern Cape can capitalize on that, because it's similar. I can assure you, we just need one PhD study to rubber stamp that. For us to be able to say indeed, it is similar, and then, we have got the results here, 90% of Khoisan there, and Nama here, it's similar. So, we can use your material. Just one PhD thesis, I can assure you, then, we would have rubber stamp that. So, the dialects of Nama spoken in Namaqualand region of South Africa is understudied, and the extent to which, so that is our challenge now. For me, as a Khoisan speaker from Namibia, I can't come here to tell you, no, in the orthography, this click, we must do this, it must be represented as such, or this vowel and so forth, because it is understudied. So we need studies, and these studies should not come from me, As an expert in Khoisan, I can be there to assist, but it must come from scholars from the Northern Cape. So we need to groom. We need to start, as from the first year. When CASA started that program of funding scholars, Khoisan scholars, and I was lucky, fortunate, to be part of this particular group, I was wondering, but what if it fails? Will it work? There were so many questions. But to think about it, today, at least when it comes to Khoisan and in Namibia, when they look for experts, they are calling me up, I'm like, oh, so I'm the expert, okay, So I'm like, and that simply means that it can be done. And that's why I've got the confidence. And your university, Sol Plaatje University, for example, is a wild place to do that. As a young university, I'm looking into these matters. Whenever we talk of Nama in South Africa, I don't only want the universities in the Western Cape to advance this narrative. It must come from the Sol Plaatje University because it's in the Northern Cape. So, and to that extent, when I was in Cape Town studying, I would see invitations, about Khoisan and so on. And then when I entered, I'm like, but there's no one, who can speak the language. Of course, I understand. But I knew that in the Northern Cape, I would find people there. Close to the border, you would find speakers of Nama, So this is why you are privileged. You need to take advantage of this position that you have in the study of Khoisan linguistics, or Khoisan or Nama, in this instance. So I won't actually push you into using the word Khoisan, so we can continue as Nama for the time being. So Khoisan is widely distributed throughout Namibia and Botswana, it indicated, okay. So, but then in South Africa, I had an opportunity to collect data for the Kora language, or Korana, but it's a Kora. So, and then, when we started the interview, I was like, okay, so this language, they say it's different, but then for a boy, when the granny said, top, I'm like, oh, top, chitos, boy and girl. So this is exactly, what we find in our old Bible, for example, and which means, and for us in Khoisan we say top. So top, it's quite similar. You can, it could have been two dialects at some stage. All right, so let's look at the dialects of Khoisan, for example. I'm trying, I'm giving this context just to show you that whenever you hear the word Khoisan, it's not far from the Nama that we actually use here in South Africa. So that needs to be clear, because currently there are rounds, as I said, in the media. You see that, some people feel that once you are speaking Nama here, it's different from the Khoisan in Namibia. That is what I want to prove beyond reasonable doubt, that it is not different. So we can definitely capitalize on that. So we have got the Khoe around the Odola area. You have got the Gaup Dama, Sesfontein, Nami Dama, Central Damara, Topnar, Central Nama, Khobabes. But then all this actually falls under the Central Damara and the Central Nama only. So it looks as if you have got many dialects here. But this was just a preliminary study by the scholars, Hage et al. In 1997. So where they would actually travel to, let's say, a town, and then, who are you? And, Sesfontein, okay. So this Nama from Sesfontein is like, okay, and so on. So that's how they have done it. Okay. All right. So one thing that I was just shown the time, once you are shown the time, it becomes, Okay, so let's look at the situation of Damara plus Nama equals Kwekwegovap. You know, it is called Kwekwegovap. So I need to be clear here, colleagues. As an academic, you know, as much as we are challenging this, I mean, Kwekwegovap, what does it really mean? Because the word Kwekwe even, the first contact among the Khoi and the Dutch, you know, apparently they were asked, who are you? And they said, we are people, Kwese Kweta Ye. You know, so, and from there it continued and, you know, it actually went on and on. But then this was basically, I mean, for the Namibian situation, it actually came from the National Institute for Educational Development, from the education side, and not from a language body. So unlike South Africa, where we have got the Pan-South African Language Board, Namibia doesn't have that. So we rely heavily on the Institute for Education, you know, so this is where it comes from. That's why you won't find an ordinary person calling themselves as Damara, or I mean as a Kwekwe. They would rather say, I'm a Damara speaker, or and Namas would say, I'm a Nama, you know. But it's because of this situation. So in my studies, I wanted to rubber stamp this issue, whether Kwekwegovap, I mean, or Central Nama and Damara are the same or different. And so I took it on. So I did a study. I mean, you know, I collected data among the Central Nama that was in Gibeon, Central Damara in Khoisan, northwestern parts of Namibia, and then the Bondelswarts Nama, because I felt that they were excluded, I mean, from the orthography when they were saying that, I mean, you can't use this word, you use this, and so on. So I had to find out if everything is the same. So no differences in the vowel system, as all dialects, I mean, have 5 basic vowels. And not only that, in terms of the nasalized vowels, it was the same. They only had 3 nasalized vowels. And, you know, I'm talking about the Central Nama and the Damara, just to give you that assurance that when you see Kwekwegovap, don't think that the Nama, I mean, you know, that you have here is different from that one. You know, we combined I mean, what we could actually find, which are the Central Nama and the Central Damara, as well as the Bondelswarts. Yeah, so in terms of the diphthongs, it was evident that all 3 dialects had the following combinations. You know, and consistently, I couldn't actually, I mean, there was no other new, I mean, combination, diphthong that I encountered. So it was the same for all the dialects. Consonants, I mean, all dialects studied distinguish between voiced and voiceless, for example. So this is the chart that can definitely be adopted, I mean, as you are moving forward with the development of Nama in this region. So you can closely look at that. We have got, I mean, and this is consistent based on the dialects that I've done. So the good thing is we have got the Central Nama that you can actually associate with, and then the Central Damara. So if Central Nama and Central Damara are the same, then, I mean, what more can one expect? So we can just capitalize and move forward. So we have got the burper, and so on. So those are the consonants. And then as for the clicks, all of them had the plain clicks like, and then, I mean, voice click like the, and then aspirated click like, and so on. They had the villa aspirated like, and then, and so on, nasalized like, and so on. So, but consistently, I mean, for all of them. So I mean, I couldn't encounter any differences there. So the only differences among the 3 dialects were minimal and at the lexical level only. But in terms of the writing system, phonemically, I mean, we simply did not encounter any differences because all the sounds were there. So phonologically, there was only one difference between the Central Nama and the Central Damara with the aspirated click combination. So whenever the click was combined, I mean, with that aspiration, villa aspiration, then like, and so on. The Damaras would say, instead of saying ho, they would say ho, ho. They would say, oh, and so on. But then the funny thing is that when it comes to the co-articulation of consonants, when you have words like cop, skin, they would say cop. They don't say hop. You know, so it was quite strange, I mean, to find that, because when it's combined with the click, I mean, something falls away. But when it's alone, it appears to be okay. So that's the situation. And it was only at the lexical level, for example, for a stomach, I mean, the Central Nama would say ngap. The central Damara would say ngap, ngap, I mean with a nationalization. And, for some words like the clouds, central Nama would say nganus, central Damara would say ounce, and so on. But there are very few. We actually know, once you just say those words, oh, you are coming from Koordans from that side, and that's why. But we actually understand. All right, so I've got 10 minutes. Proposal for a harmonized orthography. So this calls for cross-border orthographies. So the good thing is, as I pointed out in the beginning, we don't want a situation whereby Namibia is doing their own thing, and then in South Africa we are struggling. And for me, the painful reality is that when one language, especially Khoisan, is strong in Namibia, we can't allow, the language to die out in South Africa. We can't. Unified writing system for Khoisan spoken in Namibia and Nama spoken in South Africa. Khoisan is well established. So, we need to capitalize, because from grade 0 up to 3, you are taught as a medium of instruction in Khoisan. From grade 4, you can take it as a subject just like any other. And at university, of course, you can also study Khoisan at the University of Namibia. All right, so this proposal would only help, the Nama spoken in South Africa or Khoisan in the linguistic development, because we can exchange material easily, but also the determination of a standard linguistic code, which will in turn lead to material development and sharing. So, this standard linguistic code issue, currently we are challenged when it comes to typing, our, clicks and so on the keyboards. It's not easy. I always tell people that, for me, it's frustrating. If I have to translate something from whatever language to Khoisan, it takes me very long. Because I need to press 2-3 things. To come at let's say, or whereas someone else, just press one thing and then the person is gone. For the clicks, it's the same. It's fine for alveolar click, for example. It's okay because the exclamation mark is also like that. So you can just use that one. But for some, we are using for the palatal click, we use the hashtag, but it's not supposed to be that. But we can't find it, so we just put something there. And for let's say the dental click, we don't know. Some use the L, alphabet L. Some would just use a slash, and that's what's happening, So those are some. But the good thing is the orthography, we have got a standard linguistic code which we can use when you are writing here. It's easy, So at least we don't, we want a situation whereby a South African and a Namibian has written in Nama, then it must be the same, At least I must be able to see and then read it. Instead of us, having a situation where I can't see anything or understand anything. Okay, so language development efforts should capitalize on the mobility of speakers and avoid the promotion of languages in isolation. So that's my message, to all of us in here. We need to capitalize, look at the issue of developing languages together instead of, following this approach of developing languages in isolation. And then, for me as a linguist, I even feel at some stages that I failed. I have assisted in developing Khoisan in Namibia, but here, my family members, some of them are here in South Africa. They can't actually use the language, and I pride myself as a linguist, in this language, and we are doing very well that side, but here we are not doing well. So, unlike colonial borders or political borders that we have now, languages cut across borders, but this should not lead to promotion of languages in isolation. So, we have got, this language, I don't know. You can just remove the lines, the border lines. You would find that family members, one family is a South African, and the other one is a Namibian. They speak the same language, but yet, the other one says, no, I speak Khoisan because that one is recognized that side. This one says, no, I'm Nama, but the Nama here, it's not written, or you can't write it, and so on. So, we should actually do away with the borders, the political borders, because languages cut across borders. So, Nama spoken in Namibia. Of course, dialects differ, as you could see in Namibia also. You have got the Nama in the central parts in Windhoek, and then the Nama spoken in the southern parts could be different here and there in terms of the dialects. But that doesn't mean it's different. We understand each other. So that's the key. I'm concluding. I'm done. All right, so the most important thing, the name Khoisan is mainly used in education circles, so that shouldn't mislead us. So please, when you see Khoisan, please don't think that it's something different from what we have here. So it's just, I mean, Nama that we are actually using is also part of that group of, called Khoisan. So sharing an orthography do not mean you become another language. So that should be clear. If you share an orthography with Khoisan in Namibia, that doesn't simply mean that you become Khoisan now, or whatever. Because as I said, this is actually just for practical reasons, for the Ministry of Education and so on. So no one, calls themselves as Khoisan, as I alluded earlier. All right, so Southern Namibia and Northern Cape only do not share a common border, but a linguistic history. So we need to capitalize. That's why in the past, it was divided. The Cape only do not share the common border, but a linguistic history to the point that Nama spoken in Namibia was called Groot Namaland. And then, in South Africa, Klein Namaland. So based on that, it's clear that, at some stage, we were together. So we need to capitalize. We need to think of that. So I think I will end my presentation there. And I just want to say thank you, Dangi, and then Kaitangans.
But we have about a little bit less than 10 minutes to pose some questions or comments to Prof Fredricks. Thank you very much. And there's the first hand from Dexter.
Okay. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Prof Niklaas. I'm so glad that I can meet you face to face, unlike our conversations or the conversations we had via MS Teams and also via email. Yeah, your presentation was really something. I'm very excited about your presentation, the prospects for the cooperation between Sol Plaatje University and Memorialisation. University of Technology, Science and Technology. Now, as you know, we're busy with that short course, but it takes time, but we have to speed it up. And also the fact that we currently busy with writing a business proposal for the establishment of a center of research. Which will include creative writing for African languages, and Nama or Khoisan, we call it Khoisan here at Sol Plaatje University. That will also be forming part of that unit. So that's basically what we are doing with regard to the promotion of Khoisan. And it's also written in our organogram. So there are plans to have it developed as a separate language, a fully fledged language from first year up until PhD level. But it will take time because we'll have to appoint people to present from first year up until PhD level. So that's in the pipeline. I just want to assure you of developments with regard to Khoisan, what's currently happening at Sol Plaatje University. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, no. I'm looking forward to the engagements. We have actually started, but it was online, and so on. So the idea of short courses, a great idea, of course. And moving forward, I'm really keen on the bachelor's programs up to the PhD. Because I was telling, I think when I engaged Prof at some stage, I was saying, the time that I have got as an academic, please allow me to do something. At least I must train 4 or 5 linguists, in this area who can take over, and be responsible for, the languages, especially, in this case, the Nama spoken in South Africa. Because You know, if you are a speaker and you are a linguist, you won't understand the kind of ownership you have with whatever you are doing. You know, so in some instances it helps a lot. You understand it better, you know, and so on. So they are the ones who need to be guided by us and then become the experts of their languages. So we would always collaborate. And from my side, from the Namibia University of Science and Technology, at least you have got Khoisan. For us, I'm in a very strange situation, and then I also call myself acting HOD, and we are promoting English to the point that I've been fighting this. You know, I've been no, I can't allow this to happen. You know, I'm an African linguist, so unfortunately, we need to look at ways of bringing in our languages as well. To the point that we'll be studying a PhD in applied linguistics as of next year. So there, at least, I mean, you know, we can do our Khoisan and Oshiwambo and any other language for that matter. So that's at least a good step moving forward.
I'm quite impressed by your development and your vision of things with regards to African languages, especially for Khoisan, and the initiatives you are putting in place to harmonize these languages. You know, in Africa, the problem is always we see differences than similarities. And if we could preach these similarities, that we are the same, we are the people, the same people, there may be slight little things here and there, but they should not be so fundamental as to set us apart. So I'm very happy that you are taking that perspective of harmonization. Harmonization also should not mean that you are going to say this one is higher, like the Germans, so there's higher German and lower German and whatever German, and they always talk of dialects. Let's maybe innovate that harmonization to say we take each different variety as a resource. So start with dictionaries, where different words, different pronunciations are catered for as acceptable in a dictionary form, where really at the end, the future speakers will see synonymity than antonymity. You know, they will see that there is common belonging than difference. So this is really something that you need to emphasize and ensure that as you join up in the development of NAMA here in South Africa and in Namibia, you really have a perspective of common resource from a common source. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Prof Chebanne took words from my lips as it were. And thank you for those comments. I just want to, and I think like Dr. Mokwena, I'm fatigued by your typical academic conferences where we go to flex our intellectual prowess and beat ourselves on the chest and chest who's got a bigger chest than the other. and as I get more glare, I kind of like things, activities that bring some kind of change. I think I'm over my middle ages and you kind of realize you have a few years left to do something. And I really like the presentation because it challenges us to go practical, you know. And this time I like it because, you know, there's a certain South African exceptionalism that says, we are your bigger brother, Namibia, so you must be learning from us. But actually you are teaching us, you know, and it's amazing to see how advanced Namibia has done in terms of, I don't know what's the correct term to use now, my brother. Is it indigenous languages? Yeah, but the advancement that Namibia has done, and South Africa has got a lot to learn. In my previous life, I was a bureaucrat. I would have said to Prof Teise, let's do a project document now. we're sitting with 4 universities already in these conferences with a whole lot of clout in terms of the simple things to a dictionary, for example. And we know that Pansab has got money that it doesn't know what to do. I hope they are not here sometimes. And tap into that and start small. Put up a team of 4 or 5 colleagues from these 4 universities, and I'm excited. I wish I was a linguist.
As I said in the beginning, I never thought one person can change a number of things. And that situation of me being sponsored by CASAS, and initially it was just an idea, maybe, let's train these Khoisan linguists. But for me to be here today representing Khoisan, wherever I go, I am that proud person, standing as a speaker and as a linguist. And gone are the days where, for example, I was just an informant. I would just give, information. You sit and then someone asks you, what's this word? You just spit out. And today, I can actually, spit it out and then analyze it at the same time. I mean, along with another scholar and so on. So that's what we need to do with the scholars or learners, the students from the Northern Cape. So for me, as I pointed out, there's no time left for in academia. There's just so much to do. But I mean, the happiest thing, or what would make me happy at the end, is to have at least 5 PhDs, in the Northern Cape who are researching Nama. That then I've contributed. Then I can go to rest. Thank you very much.
Well, baie dankie. Dis baie nice om hier te wees. I've been dying to speak Afrikaans. Ons kan nie. So English is kind of the language that you have to speak all over. So it was very nice. I haven't spoken, Afrikaans in a professional context in a very, very long time. The other time I do this is obviously at Stellenbosch, where my PhD is located. So it's really, really nice to be here. So I wanted to acknowledge my very good colleague, Dr. Mokwena, on this excellent initiative. I think it's a wonderful program, and again, to acknowledge and to thank the Sol Plaatje University, for hosting this event the second time around. It's so nice to be here. We've had some excellent speakers thus far. And as a sociologist, I've been trying to see where am I going to fit myself in, because the nature of the conversations have been so interdisciplinary. So even though it was difficult for me to fit myself in, I also think I'm in good company, because each speaker that's been speaking thus far, have been adding a unique flavor, unique style to the conversation that we've been having today. So what I want to talk about today is exactly as our colleague just mentioned, around how young men in the Namaqualand district construct and perform their masculinities through dance. And so maybe what I wanted to do is maybe just to give you a background. So I'm not going to read this yet. I'm going to just quickly speak about the context of my research and how I ended up doing this work. So as a sociologist, I've been very concerned that, the lives, the stories of so-called colored people are non-existent, right? And so and while I say the word colored, I also just need to say using the word colored makes me feel very uncomfortable, because the word itself for many is offensive. It has a lot of connotations to it, and it's not always representative of the people who may sometimes agree and disagree with the label. So, and I found the same thing in my own research and when I was doing this study. So just to kind of put that disclaimer out there, it's very difficult to talk about race in any way in post-apartheid South Africa, but it's even more so when you talk about, the group that has been racially classified as colored. And we know, like I said, it's a diverse group of people. Based on the conversation that we've had here today, we know that concept and the category is vastly inadequate, and it's not reflective of the diverse people who have come to embody that identity. Nevertheless, as a scholar specifically located in sociology and in South Africa, it's very difficult to write about our lives and about our stories without locating yourself within a particular discipline. So I need to say that, and you are going to find similar experiences as many of you, some of you, I can see maybe our postgraduate students and some emerging academics. It's really difficult to break out of the labels that we have inherited. Okay, so I just want to put it out there. So in sociology and social sciences, we still use the apartheid classifications, racial classifications, when we talk about each other. So while I do not want to, so when I use the word colored, and I'm only going to use it once, I want you to understand that I do so with extreme ambivalence and makes me feel uncomfortable. All right, but so what I instead do in my entire talk, I'm going to use the word brain, because brain is the word that, and I'm not talking about the brain, ek praat van brain in Afrikaans. So my participants, based on which this paper is based on, and in the Namaqualand region, and I'll speak to that in a moment, you know, when I ask them about race and how they make sense of racial identities in post-apartheid South Africa, they do not use the word colored or even kleurling. When they talk about themselves in everyday conversations and exchanges, they talk about brain, you know, ons breinmense. So what I'm going to do today is, when I use the word brain, you know, just know that that too is inadequate. But if I to use a particular ethnic category or ethnic label such as Nama or Kora, the list is endless. That too is problematic, as you would have picked up thus far, because there's just so many concepts that we are throwing around. So I think it's important to kind of just give that disclaimer about race and how I'll be using the racial concepts and categories in my conversation, in my talk here this morning. All right, so my interest is really how do we theorize brain people's lives? How do we make sense of people, this broad category of people who we can call brown? How do we theorize their lives? How do we write about their lives? How do we write their stories? And so my frustration as a kind of a young scholar was, you know, all the work that's being done in relation to brainmense in South Africa is always written in relation to the so-called Cape Coloured. So their lives, their stories is what we have to view on television and radio. So as many have shown here, is that a lot of the kind of so-called brain dialect or Afrikaaps or even Kaaps, if you have it, is based on their experiences. So I wanted my research to be very different. I wanted to focus specifically on the Noord-Kaap and how we theorize and how we theorize social life in the Northern Cape province. That's kind of what brought me to this research. But obviously, you know, that's a major question that can span multiple PhDs and multiple books. So I needed to kind of narrow that down. So I narrowed that down to focus on how do young colored men, or how do young brain men, construct themselves in relation to gender, what it means to be a man or what it means to be masculine and feminine, to race, what it means to be colored or brain or whatever other category they may use, and thirdly, to sexuality. You know, how you perform and how you locate your sexuality in relation to your gender identity and in relation to race. Now, so that's kind of the context. That's how I get here. So now my research then is a school-based ethnography that's being done in a small dorpie in the Namaqualand region of the Northern Cape province. And so this, what I'm going to read to you now is an excerpt, is basically a reflection that I wrote on my first day. And again, this study is my PhD study. And so this is one of this is kind of one of my first reflections, of the school. And I thought that this is quite interesting because it says a lot about the town, the community, but it also says a lot about the school. And so I'm reading this by way of introducing my study, and hopefully, this will inform my talk going forward. All right, so I say, it's a wintry July morning, and I'm on my way to school for the first time. Almost wrecked with uncertainty and various anxieties, I notice how the muddy clay streets separate streets of housing units. Almost every unit I pass has wooden or zinc shacks erected on whatever space is available. Groups of young and older people huddle around fires made in used 25 paint tins, or what we call a galley. The people are warmed, or rather, the people are wrapped in blankets that keep themselves warm, and to reduce the stench of the chemicals emitted from the wood, the coal, the plastics, and other objects burned to create the heat source, learners are making their way to school. Adults are making their territory close to these galley pits or fire pots for the rest of the day. Many of the houses I pass are blackened by years of smoke. Window panes are replaced with cardboard or zinc sheets. And it would appear that many houses do not have electricity. One by one, children join rows of pupils making their way to school. Many of the learners I walk past have sleep written all over their faces, like they have just gotten out of bed and are rushing to get to school. There's no uniformity in the clothes that they are wearing. I'm unsure if the schools there even have a uniform, or if the learners are simply unable to afford the uniforms. I see older women in their nightgowns walking smaller children to school. I finally arrive at New Hope High. So New Hope Secondary School is a pseudonym, so not the real name. A few moments, my apology, I finally arrive at New Hope Secondary School. The school ought to start in a few moments, which is now at 7:30 in the morning. I check my watch. It is now 7:25. But there's little movement there. I only see a few well-dressed adults. I assume they are teachers, but learners are taking their time as they enter the school. It's now 7:45. The bell has still not rung. The teachers who pass me just nod, but no one asks me who I am or who I'm waiting for. I now inform the secretary that I'm the PhD researcher and that I would like to speak to the principal. She tells me that the principal, She tells me that the principal's door, She tells me that the principal is seeing parents and instructed that he should not be disturbed. Finally, it's now 8 o'clock and the principal's door open. He nods at me as he rushes to the staff room where he's about to address teachers for their morning briefing. 45 minutes after the school was meant to start, at 8:15, teachers adjourn from their morning briefing and the bell rings twice, signaling the start of the school day. During all this time, I was looking at the trophy cabinet and observing the learners as they are entering the school premises. There's a reception area, but there are no seats allocated to visitors. I continue to stare idly at the trophy cabinet. The pictures in the trophy cabinet trace previous staff members and school principals. The pictures I see look similar to the present-day school. The land is barren, almost no trees or grass areas, with no dedicated space for recreation or extracurricular activities such as a school hall, a rugby field, or even a netball court. The only thing that changed over the past 20 years is the school's name. It changed in 1996 from Jan van Riebeeck Secondary School to New Hope Secondary School. A very good metaphor for the transition, quote unquote, from apartheid to democratic South Africa. And so I thought that, while I'd written that quote, I was obviously, I was taking in a lot of information, trying to make sense as a sociologist, because I'm going into this space and I have to literally become unfamiliar to make the unfamiliar familiar, if that makes sense. So you have to take note of every single thing and you have to try and make sense of what is happening here? What does this tell us? What does this tell us about the society? What does this tell us about the school? What does this tell us about the school culture, the school climate? If the school is meant to start at 7:30, but 45 minutes later the bell rings with no indication. And I'm the visitor, and again, the principal knew I was coming because he had arranged my temporary accommodation. So he knew, he was expecting me. The other thing that kind of really stood out for me was there's two things, and then I'm going to get to kind of the content. The other thing, the second thing that stood out for me, or second last thing that stood out for me, was the empty trophy cabinets, and the pictures, and what does it mean these empty trophy cabinets? What does it symbolize? And I'm asking myself, why are they not taking it out? Why don't they not just take it off or put something in there, even if it's make-believe? I was thinking about all of these things. And finally, the school's name. And that's perhaps the most striking thing for me about the study, was that, and it was interesting because they have pictures of when the school was built in 1985. And they were celebrating, I think, 25 years, because this was in 2015. What would it have been, 30 years, eh? It would have been 30 years, from 1985 to 2015. Is that 40 years? Yeah, 30 years. And so they were kind of in the midst of preparing for this 30-year celebration, the school. And the only thing, but even though the faces changed, the building stayed the same in the 30 years. And again, the most important thing that I wanted to leave with us is about the school's name. And I thought that was so telling about post-apartheid South Africa. And so I read this to kind of give you insight to the kind of social context. And many of you may be familiar with schooling environments like this. But it was nevertheless an interesting thing for me to observe. And so let me get to the content of what I wanted to talk about today. Oh, my apologies. Let's see if it goes there. Oh, right. So Muhammad Adhikari, some of you may know, he's a, oh Lord, okay. he's a historian. Sorry, our colleague just said I had 15 minutes. So Muhammad Adhikari contends that the marginality of colored, and again, here's my disclaimer, henceforth, I'll be using the word brain because that is how my participants talk about race. So Muhammad Adhikari contends that the marginality of the colored community is reflected in South Africa's historiography, in that relatively little has been written about the history and of this social group. And a lot of what has been written about this particular community has been journalistic, polemic, speculative, poorly researched, or heavily biased. In many general histories, brain people have effectively been written out of the narrative. And so one way I argue to disrupt this notion is to rewrite brain people into this narrative. And how can we do that? We can do that by documenting and theorizing about brain people's lives. And I argue it's not just necessary, but it is very much important. It's urgent. It's long overdue. And I'm so happy to be in a context like this, where a lot of the histories, a lot of the focus this morning has been around language, taalgebruik. And I think that what we've been discussing thus far, today, has really been to rewrite, the social life, the social practices, the cultures and traditions of brain people into the narrative. And my work tries to speak to that. And so my research really has been, or my ambition, and I should say it's an ambition, is really, and again, it may not be possible, but at least this is what I think is important. So how do we write brain people, into the contemporary South African narrative? Because we live in a country, we live in a post-apartheid South Africa that exists in white and black. But colored people are not only socially and politically marginalized, or brain people are not only socially and politically and economically marginalized, they are completely written out. They're being wiped out. Hence you see, kind of far-right movements such as Gatvol Cape Town and many other such groupings gain popularity among some brain people because of the frustration that they have with the ANC government in how it has advanced particular kinds of racial regimes that continues to exclude brain people. So, for example, and maybe I'll get there, it's one of the slides. So I'm arguing that one of the problems with current scholarship is that brain people in general and brain young men in particular are misunderstood, misrepresented, and generally regarded as misfits. This is evident in the multiple ways that brain people are marginalized, silenced, and caricatured in popular discourses in post-apartheid South Africa. For example, if you had to Google quickly colored, you are going to find Kaapse klopse, people with no front teeth, and similar kinds of very racist and very biased, assumptions about what it means to be colored, right? And so one of the things that I'm hoping to do in my work is to disrupt that. I also say descriptions of brain people, even in academic literature and in the media, is laden with racist stereotypes which present brain people as a monolith, as if everybody's the same. Almost always in relation to poverty, to gangsterism, violence, alcoholism. The favorite thing, even this very province, is the capital of fetal alcohol syndrome, and obviously gender-based violence. Furthermore, many of the social problems that you will find in current scholarship portray what they portray reflects the apparent social realities of urban centers. The aforementioned narratives about brain people are not only troubling, but have the potential to cement the notion that brain people are insignificant, irrelevant, and inconsequential. These narratives, whether intended or not, give credibility to the claim made by Marieke de Klerk, the wife of former President F.W. de Klerk, that brain people are a negative group. They are the leftovers. They are the rest. It is a serious indictment on the notion of a post-apartheid South Africa, when almost 40 years after Marieke de Klerk uttered these words, brain people in South Africa continue to exist on the political, economic, and social margins of society. Isaac Deary and colleagues, in response to basically the problems and the pathologization of colored people or brain people, argues, and he writes specifically in relation to kind of black boys and young men, broadly speaking, he argues that most scholarship, particularly from the global north, continue to theorize African men, especially poor black men, as problematic, abusive, and violent. Such scholarship often fails to foreground how men's gendered subjectivities are likely to be shaped by intersecting inequalities. The danger of such neglect is that African men continue to be pathologized and being unable to cope with Western liberal conceptions of gender equality. Ironically, the majority of the scholarship tended to point to the harm and problematics attributed to men and masculinities on the continent, particularly in particularly within Southern Africa, where much of this research emerges. So if you, for example, we hear it every day, whereby South Africa is considered to be the most violent society. It is considered to be the rape capital of the world. So a lot of this research, what it then does is it, in a way, so even though we have to deal with that and we have to take it seriously, the problems or the social problems that men cause, not just for themselves, but for other people around them, their partners, their girlfriends, their boyfriends, their friends and their families. So I think we need to take that seriously, but I don't think it's very helpful when we only theorize and when we think about gender-based violence and all we do is just problematize black men, broadly speaking, as so-called using the concept of toxic masculinity. I think there's a lot more that we have to do. And what I'm arguing is that we need to understand how young men, specifically the young men that I'm reflecting on in this context, I'm arguing that if we want to, for example, as one example, if we want to address the gender-based violence and the crime that we experience in our communities, we need to understand young men. We need to engage with them. We need to try and make sense of the world through their eyes. Well, that's one of the things that I'm arguing, instead of problematizing them and pathologizing them as general misfits. Because many of us here, and I always think about my own life, I could have been that statistic as well. I grew up in so-called colored township, in the Noord-Kaap, where home is. It's pretty much reflects what I've been talking about. So on the colored side of the town, and what I found interesting is, and I wasn't able to drive around here, but in most of these small towns, so there's no transformation or there's no post into how if you go to these communities, you still have a dorp or the white side of town, and you still have a colored or a black side of town. So as a sociologist that's interested in social inequalities, I ask myself, so where's the post in this? And even in relation to schooling as well. So one of the reasons why I wanted to, in my reflection, I spoke about the trophy cabinets, I spoke about the rugby fields, and so on. This school that my research is based on, what I call New Hope High, was the school for coloureds. So people, when they talk in their everyday language, they talk about the brain school, but they can only talk about the brain school because there's also a wit school. So at the wit school, you have a library, you have the rugby fields, you have all of these kind of things. So what I found interesting in my study is how these young men, the teachers and people in the town, talk about, so what I call here in a moment, maybe let me just jump there because of time. They talk about the brain school, die wit kant, die wit dorp, die wit winkel, die wit kroeg. So everything has a racial connotation to it. So what whiteness then means in this context specifically is around, how whiteness becomes associated with prestige, with wealth, with goodness, with quality, etc., etc. And so what I call this in my study is, I didn't term it, I just use this, the framework is what scholars call the racialization of space. And so what I argue when we think about the racialization of space, how this is relevant to my particular studies is for these young men, these young brain men, for them to identify and construct their beings in a context that is so racialized, that is so classed, that is so gendered, that is so sexist, that they have to do a lot of think work. So just because I won't be able to show you that, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about this, and I'm using that same train of thought around the racialization, kind of the racialization of space and what that means then for these young men. So what I find is that in relation to, for example, how these young men move around in the town, they do a lot of think work. So for example, I asked them, so where do you hang out? What do you do for fun? So in the way that they describe the things that they do, race almost always features without me asking them about race. So I wouldn't mention ras. Or I should also say my interviews and my studies in Afrikaans, so all of this is translated, obviously, for the benefit of the audience. But I don't ask them about ras. I would ask them, so, kan jy my vertel, wat doen julle oor die naweek? So can you tell me about what you do over the weekends? And they will say, ons gaan na die brein klap toe, of ons gaan na die sportsgronde toe. You will go to the brown or colored club, because even in this small town, there's two clubs. There's two of everything, basically. There's two churches. There's the NG Kerk. There's the VGK. There is, the white school, the colored school, white shops. And so without me having to ask them these things, what comes out to me as the researcher going there, it's clear that these young people are very much intelligent. They think of these things. So, for example, I ask them, what do you do over the weekends? They say, well, we go there and go. So I ask them, why don't you, for example, go to the tennis courts? Why don't you go to the tennis courts? So the tennis courts happen to be on the white side of town. And they say, no, is nie vir ons bedoel nie. Right? As vir die wit mense. Quite literally, quote unquote. That's not for us, it's for white people. So coming back to the point really about, masculinity, and I'm going to steal 2 minutes of somebody's time because I want to get to the point around why Rieldans, Koordans, and Sexdans is so important. You may not get it if you don't understand this context wherein this dance happens and why this dance has this particular and special meaning for these young men. So, all right. So one of the arguments, that one of the things that I find is that they do a lot of think work, basically, that where they hang out, where they walk, what time they walk in the area is thought through. And I almost want to say it's calculated because they are very much aware of transgressing. So being found on the white side of town the wrong time on a Saturday night. And so all of this kind of trigger within me this questioning of this post. Where is this post then? Where's this post? We hear about post-apartheid, we hear about democratic, but for these young men, in 2015, so my study was over a year, 2015 and 2016, I did an ethnography, I spent there a year in the town, in the field. Where's this post then? Prof Crouch spoke this morning about the inequalities of why this province is unable to tap into its richness and wealth. So how on earth can these young men from nearby towns, what is the closest one here, Richie? And I'm sure many other towns, how on earth are they going to imagine coming to this university when their whole lives they have been told that university is nie vir julle nie. Universities are not for you. And NSFAS is not, you're not black enough. So it was really fascinating for me to kind of hear young people themselves tell you this. Nobody prompted them. Just one last thing I wanted to say on this as I get now to the dancing and why dancing is so significant is the social inequalities of the town. So what I was fascinated by, so even though, the white school is no longer a school for whites only, in fact, the majority of the learners at the school are coloreds. They are brain mense, but yet the school is still the wit school. So it was interesting, so what does this mean? What does this tell us? What does whiteness represent in their minds, in their own way of theorizing this world? What does it mean? Well, I find that I mentioned it already, but in their minds, this whiteness is associated with brilliance. So, for example, colored or brain parents who are able to afford the school, the wit school, send their children to that school because, they do better there. The teachers that are at that school are also, brain teachers, colored teachers. No, they are better at that school. They get better results at that school. And again, while there's a lot of truth to this, because if you compare the academic results, it is a lot better in terms of your matric results output. It does differ in comparison. And so what I then asked them about, what do we need to do? Why is this mindset? Why is it important then to change the way that we think, the way that they? So I asked them this question. So do you think it helps you when you talk about the white school and the white town and so on? And then they were telling me, and then the question related, I asked them, is that helpful then to think to think about your life in these white and black or wit and brain ways? And what really fascinated me was they were saying, well, it really doesn't help us because what it does, it just perpetuates this idea that brain is associated with failure, is associated with miscegnation, is associated with all that's bad and negative. Now, let's go to the dance. In this community then, where there's high dropout rate, where clearly there's limited opportunities for them to explore and to be themselves, violence becomes an important route, an important vehicle through which these young men assert themselves. So when there's conflict, the first thing that they rush to is to fight. If there's a disagreement, is to fight. If they can't get the girl that they wanted, there's a fight. So violence then becomes this very important, I don't know if it's a strategy, if it's a vehicle, I'm not quite sure how to use it, but just it becomes this instrument that these young people use. And what was interesting for me then, dance and how they dance was an alternative to the crime and the violence, this notions that basically reaffirms the problematics, of what is associated with so-called brainness. Now, dancing becomes this vehicle for different kinds of young men. And so what was interesting in my study was to see how dance and different kinds of dance was constructed. So the boys, for example, who were implicated in fighting and violence, they then said, well, we are going to do break dance, or brick dance. And it was fascinating to kind of observe how, through movement, that these young men found ways to express themselves in ways that are not necessarily problematic, and I use it very cautiously. Secondly, another alternative way that these young men found a way to express themselves and to express their manhood and their personhood in this context was through Rieldans. Rieldans, I know a colleague is going to talk about Rieldans, and I think you are going to see what Rieldans is like for those who have not seen it. But what is interesting was how Rieldans takes on this new meaning for these young men, where opportunities are limited, where they can't express themselves, where they can't be themselves fully. And another category of dance that emerges, that kind of really takes hold of the school during my research, is Koordans. So then I asked these young people, okay, so what does it mean? Because there's different kinds of young men that are invested in different kinds of dance. Just my apologies, there's one last dance that I forget to mention, and that's the Sexdans. And so the Sexdans is really what they call kind of sexy dance or sensual dance. And so this group of young men, they call themselves the Carters, and they dance, to Beyonce's music. And so you may know that the Carters, Beyonce's surname is Carter, yeah? So they call themselves the Carter. And what was so fascinating was, imagine in this small town, when they have like a sport, usually, on the Saturday, after the sports, the rugby match, which is kind of common in these, in the small towns in the Noord-Kaap, they have these derbies, so where the two opposing towns, and it's a massive event. They have the derbies, and after the derby, they have like a show that it's really kind of people just do it by themselves, and after that's followed by karaoke, etc., etc. Anyhow, so what was fascinating for me was, in a context, like I said, where violence seems to be this very dominant way that young boys and men kind of express themselves, here comes the Carters, who allegedly do a dance that transgresses what the appropriate way is to be a man in this small dorpie. So they dance like, so anybody see how, what's her name, Beyonce dances? So all the single ladies, that kind of stuff. So it's very sensual, moving, kind of dance. And it was so fascinating for me because it takes on this new meaning, for these young boys and young men who could not express themselves in other ways. So really the point of my presentation today was, in context, such as this small town, I'd questioned this idea of this idea of the post-apartheid, when so little has changed in terms of infrastructure and social relations. In terms of educational outcomes, in terms of educational throughput, very little has changed. So the life chances for brain men still looks very dim. It doesn't look very good. It's very grim, and it looks not very positive. But I'm ignoring you intentionally. But I know you're going to come out now. But what happens then? Dance just becomes this vehicle through which these young men find an opportunity to express themselves in new and in different ways. And and this is really the crux, I've said that many times, is how Rieldans, as a form of cultural expression, how it just motivates this pride and, being a particular kind of man in this town. So how, the Rieldans become a particular kind of way that these boys want to assert themselves in their beings. Koordans, dance, the kind of dance that you do in church, how that becomes a very particular way how these young men want to assert themselves and how they want to be known in the town. The Carters who do the Sexdans, how this dance becomes this particular way that they are going to assert themselves and kind of locate themselves in this particular context with little opportunities for self-expression and so on. What are the implications of this really? That one, the ways that young men embody, gender, sex, and race is complicated and it is complex. If we want to understand and if we want to address thoroughly the problems of young people, we have to hear this from their mouths. We have to ask them what the solutions are because they have all the solutions within them. Baie dankie. Thanks for your patience. I appreciate it.
So I want to find out, perhaps, and I've not read your work, so it's bad of me to review a book without reading it. I wanted to find out to what extent does the post not mean a class dimension within but it's a homogeneous community. predominantly colored or white. I'm assuming that it's predominantly colored, brain. To what extent is perhaps the pose that you're looking for, it could be a child's dimension? And to what extent does that come out in your research and in the dance categories? Because I know in the black African township, I wouldn't dance Bantula, my father will knock me out, you know. There's certain dance I just wouldn't do, just a reflection of class or something else. So to what extent does that come out? Thank you.
Thanks for that. That's a brilliant question, and you're spot on. You know, class does feature prominently, and I think what I couldn't mention, and it's my own fault because of time, that's why I get very excited. So it's very much a working class community, kind of poor community. You don't have to go very far. I can take you today still. I can show you a community that looks exactly like that. This is the thing about post-apartheid South Africa. You know, go to any small klein dorpie in the Northern Cape, even in the Western Cape, the Free State, it looks exactly the same. Looks exactly the same. So my idea, that what I'm questioning is this: where is this post? Because if we are no longer a racist society, we are non-racial society, where there's no Group Areas Act that prohibits me from being on the white side of town. So even though those have all been, you know, abolished, but yes, obviously class is that thing, right? And obviously there is this debate, obviously, around, you know, so how do we theorize then the middle classes, the ones that are now arriving, that are also sending their children to private schools, and so it's a very interesting thing, and maybe I don't have enough time to really reflect on that, but to answer your question really around class, yes, so class does play a huge role in that. The community that I worked in is very much kind of working class. So in this context where there's very little else to do, Koordans, you know, because what do you need to do Koordans? You really just need people, you know, and you don't even need songs. You know, I also stayed at the hostel, and we could literally just klap, you know, to clapping of hands. That was our entertainment, and everybody would dance. And it was one of the best times that I've had in my life. I couldn't believe that, you know, within this context of nothingness, how people create something and joy out of that. So yes, class does play a role, but I think we also learn a lot about masculinity and theorizing gender in post-apartheid South Africa. How, if you just Google even gender in South Africa or theorizing gender, much of this work is based on black young men. You know, black broadly speaking, so black or African, as we are told, we need to call each other African, colored, and Indians. It's based on their life experiences. And we use that experience to theorize everybody else. And I'm saying that doesn't help us because, you know, just want to say it doesn't take us very far.